All right, so we got Eric Johnson today. Good afternoon, Eric. How are you doing?
Doing all right. How about you?
I'm doing all right. Can't complain. The sun actually decided to come out today. It's been pretty cloudy this morning, so things are looking good. And as always, we got Cody Randall. Well, I say as always. I think he's missed the last couple interviews that I've done, but
Here
it's all
when I
right.
can.
Yeah. So Eric, let's kind of start off with a little bit of about you. Where'd you grow up and how did you get into public safety starting off?
Well, I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, and actually I grew up more than most. You may remember I'm 7 feet tall, so I did a lot of growing up. I honestly don't know where the interest came from, but as long as I can remember, all I wanted to do was be a police officer. And when I was 18, I wanted to be an EMT because I knew I wasn't old enough to be an officer. So I became an EMT, got hired by Louisville EMS, and I served there for 9 years before switching into law enforcement.
What was the driving force of wanting to be a police officer?
Mainly just, I know it sounds cliche, but to make a difference, be able to see a situation where just something isn't right. Somebody isn't being treated fairly, crime, somebody's a victim, but to be able to do something to make a difference, to have the authority to do something, the opportunity to be sent into situations to help. And that's what I wanted to do.
Did anybody in your family ever do public safety?
One of my brothers also is a retired police officer. And my other two brothers both wanted to be police officers, but for various reasons, they didn't. All three of them went into the military. I tried. They said I was too tall. I don't understand that. But it was post Vietnam and they were scaling back. And so I didn't go in the military. But my other two brothers spent time in the car industry. So I used to tell people in my family there were two cops and two crooks. My brothers didn't think that was funny, but I enjoyed it.
It's pretty good. So what was EMS like for you? You were in the city of Louisville. How did that all go?
Well, you certainly mature fast. Grew up in a quieter part of town, and just overnight now I'm working in the projects, the high crime area, and responding to shootings and stabbings, and just a little bit of everything. And it was definitely eye opening, something I had not been around.
And then how long were you in EMS before you went into police?
9 years, and there was a consent decree in Louisville at the time, and so there was a hiring freeze that went on for a few years, and I kind of got caught in that. Um, so I continued on at EMS, and then eventually made the switch.
So what he was talking about, kind of almost like a culture shock, for lack of a better term, when he got to EMS. It's very, very similar to how I felt when I first got into EMS in Fort Wayne. I grew up in I call it the metropolis of Huntington, Indiana, and to go from, I was also homeschooled too. So there was even more of a culture shock. So, but grew up in that small town, low crime, relatively nice area to now I'm getting thrown into similar situations to what you were describing with your experience with EMS starting out. So
I
I can
remember
relate.
I remember very early run. The roads were bad, and there was this bad wreck where a car had been going really fast. I think it was a stolen car. And it started spinning and it went broadside into a steel utility pole. The car broke in half, and there were three people critically injured. There were legs amputated and an arm, and just bodies and body parts all over. And I was a backup ambulance and pulled up, opened the door, jumped out. I was driving, and as my foot hit the ground, it landed right next to a leg that had a sock still on it. And that just, I don't know if I paused for a millisecond or a few seconds, but it's like it was, I don't know. I had a moment, and then I realized, you don't have time to get weird about this. There's people depending on you, and you've accepted that responsibility, and it's time you do what needs to be done. And quickly got into action. All three of them died. None of them survived. It was definitely a horrible scene, but that was, you come from a tame background, quiet neighborhood, and all of a sudden you're being thrust into the absolute worst that society has, and you come in you're supposed to make a difference. And that's whether it's in EMS or law enforcement or fire service, that's what you do. And you have to be ready for that.
100% agree.
How did you push through that? I know you said, you realized that you had a job to do and you needed to take care of those that you could, but in the long run, how did you end up pushing through that?
Yeah, I don't know. I just knew that I had to. I didn't have a choice. I'd accepted that responsibility, and um, I was there. I'd put myself there. I'd gone through the training, and it wasn't time to back out and say, "Wait a minute, I don't want to do this." I wanted to do it, but it was just a little bit of a shock. Go to jump out and see body parts, and then again, the weird thing was the sock on the leg. That was the thing I think that weirded me out more than anything. I'm not sure why, but that was just not expected. And then later, I had the leg under my arm as I was running around looking for another leg. I didn't even think about it at the time. You do what has to be done.
Very well said. So you go into the police side of things. What does the academy look like for you?
You're learning a lot of good stuff. You're learning laws and procedures, but at the same time, they're messing with you mentally, trying to make sure you're cut out for it, that you can handle the pressures of the streets. So they do a lot of weird stuff. And I knew that. I knew they were going to do that. And so you have to endure it. I call it playing the game. If you want to graduate, if you want to be an officer, you got to go through the motions. And there's a lot of learning, and then, you do a lot of shooting and driving, and even arrest and restraint where you're fighting people. And again, I was the largest guy in the class at 7 feet. So I had a little bit of a physical advantage when it came to subduing people. And people didn't want to have to do that, be my partner and those types of things. It was I think it was about 20 weeks long at the time. It was a long 20.
Kind of going backwards just a little bit. Did you play any sports in high school?
Not really. I played a little football. Everybody, of course, wanted me to play basketball. I really wasn't interested. It's not something that I enjoyed. People today will ask me, did you play football? I'm sorry. They'll say, did you play basketball? And my usual response, particularly if it's somebody short, no. Did you play miniature golf? That usually elicits somewhat of a response.
That's awesome.
Great.
Yeah, I get some really good responses from that, but not always.
I bet.
Sometimes it literally goes over people's heads. So it doesn't
Yeah.
always work.
I'm going to use that on my wife.
Same, but I might not live to tell the story, so I might hold back on that one. So you did EMS, you did police. Were you a chaplain also? I thought I read something about that.
No, people have asked me that, and no, I was never officially a chaplain. I think I had somewhat had the mindset of a chaplain. I mean, I wanted to truly help people in every way that I could, and I was a hostage negotiator. Member of the hostage negotiating team. It probably is the more appropriate way to say it. And because I knew that not, arresting people wasn't always the answer, and sometimes you could talk to people. And now that you talk about a lot of de-escalation, we did that even before we knew that was going to be the buzzword. Try to talk people into cooperating and going to the hospital if they needed to, as far as for mental health, psychiatric evaluation, rather than forcibly subduing them and restraining them and taking them. But no, I was not a chaplain. I considered going to chaplain training, but I never did that.
What did you like most about being, we'll start with EMS. What did you enjoy most about doing that job?
Just the positive difference you could make for somebody. Many times I had people come up to me in public and say, hey, I want to shake your hand. You saved my life. And honestly, all the cases like that I recall, I really didn't. They were in a stress situation. Maybe they were having trouble breathing, and, they were high anxiety and feeling like they were going to die. And, it's just calming them down, giving them oxygen, doing the things to help them get under control and get to the hospital. I felt really good about that. And I'm sure there's some lives along the way. I mean, that's what EMS does. You make a difference. But I know the ones that actually told me that. I don't really think that was the case in those. But it does make you feel good that you made a difference. So, and that was, you know, actually one time I was in a bad situation as an officer. I had somebody handcuffed in the projects in the middle of the night by myself. And I had people challenging me saying I wasn't going to take that person out. And I called for backup, but you know, they were coming. And I had somebody step out of the crowd and get between me and them and said, no, you know, you're not going to touch him. You got to go through me. And what I found out later is that I had made a run on his mother many years ago when I was with EMS. And they felt that, you know, we had saved her life. And that's why he stood up for me that day. So that's pretty powerful stuff. Very rewarding.
I think that's awesome. And that just kind of goes to show some of the things that Cody and I have talked about in the past. You know, it doesn't matter what you're going through. When you sign up to do that job, you've made a promise that you are going to be there for the people that need you. And that includes attitude. You know, if you go into the job and you've got a horrible attitude and you treat people like garbage when they don't deserve to be treated like that, I mean, that could come back and bite you. Just like on the flip side, you treat people with respect, you do your job, your job well, you know, that can come back tenfold to help you out in the future. And that's just a prime example of that.
I couldn't agree more. I've preached that my whole career. And I remember making a run one day. We had just been making runs back to back to back. And we arrived on the scene. I think it was a febrile seizure, and the woman met us on the sidewalk and started yelling at us and how we would have been there faster if it was in a different part of town. And I yelled back at her. And I remember thinking, you know, if that's the way I'm going to be and treat people, it's time to move on for a new occupation. That for her, it was one of the worst days of her life. She was fearful that her child was going to die. I should have been more understanding of that. I always tried to be, but that day I wasn't.
I think it's safe to say that, I mean, everybody has a bad day, right? Like
Absolutely.
Cody and I aren't perfect. I'm sure we've made some comments that we may have regretted, but
Well, I know
and
I have.
that's yeah, and that just kind of goes out to the listeners too. Like, you know, like I said, Cody and I have talked about this before about showing people respect and compassion and understanding that, like you said, Eric, you know, when people call us, it's the worst day of their life, and they're not calling us just to invite us in for some coffee and pie. They're having a bad day. But with that being said, we are human and we make mistakes and we say things that we regret sometimes. So I think those are very valid points. What was on the flip side? What what did you love most about being a police officer?
Again, being able to make a difference, being able to come into a situation and making a difference, whatever that was. You know, if it was somebody, I rolled up on a rape one night, a rape in progress in a ditch beside some railroad tracks, and I made a difference that night. And um, you know, you just tell those stories all day long. That's what first responders do. Whichever field you're in, you make a difference. And you know, even arresting a drunk driver, you know, potentially saving lives by taking that individual off the street and treating them with respect, and hopefully influencing them that, you know, not just by the arrest, but hopefully having a positive influence, encouraging them not to ever do that again. You know, that again, you can make a difference in the way you treat people. I had a guy come up to me one night in a gas station and say, same as I mentioned earlier, hey, I want to shake your hand. You saved my life. I was skeptical, you know, because I'd been told so many times by people that I was ruining their life by arresting them. You know, that's a common phrase that police officers hear. And anyway, he told me a story. He said that I'd arrested him for his third offense, DUI, and he was, you know, cussing me out. He was going to, you know, rape my mother, kill my dog, and just do everything, you know. And I was respectful. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. No, sir. Watch your head, sir, as you get in the car. And I said to him when we got to jail, so why are you acting like this? You're better than this. And he said that made him really mad. And that night as he was sitting in jail, he thought, how is it that this guy believes in me more than I believe in myself? And he said that night he made a commitment that he was never going to be back in jail again. He stopped drinking, and he had been estranged from his wife. They got back together. They started a new business. And he said at the time that I saw him, he said, I'm more successful and happier than I've ever been. And, he gave me credit for that. And I said, that's not true. You had that within you. You just needed somebody to give you the nudge, to give you the encouragement. And again, I think that's what first responders do. You're not going to make a difference in every situation, but you're going to be given multiple opportunities every shift to make a difference somehow for somebody. And I think we all have an obligation to do our best to make that difference.
I think that's pretty powerful. To be completely honest, we all, once you've done the job for, even more than a year, you start to get to this point where it's monotonous. You put the uniform on, you drive to work, you clock in, you get in your ambulance or whatever the case may be, and we forget that this job can be and should be more than just what our description says. You don't have to just be that guy that goes and provides medical aid. You don't have to be just that guy that goes and arrests people for DUIs. You can really make an impact in whatever position you're in. And especially when it comes to leadership. One of the things that used to drive me nuts, looking back at it now, it was silly. But it used to drive me nuts when everybody would say, you don't have to have the title to be a leader. Everybody can be a leader. And it's true, 100%. If you take
Absolutely.
on the mentality that you are a leader with whatever job you're doing, you're going to act like a leader. You're going to act like somebody who enjoys what they're doing. And I think you hit the nail on the head with that.
No, I 100% agree on that. Leadership isn't a title. Leadership is action.
So, kind of walk me through. You're one of the co-founders of Supporting Heroes. Kind of walk me through on how that whole situation started.
Well, I think go back to my general perception, when I first became a first responder. And I think a lot of first responders have this perception. I think most citizens have this. I thought that if somebody died in the line of duty, and remember, when we're talking line of duty death, we're not talking about somebody just coincidentally dying on duty. They're dying because of duty. It's because of the uniform they wear, that maybe they're a target, which is typically a lot of times in the case of a police officer death. It's something they do in the line of duty that causes their death. A firefighter goes into a fire and, he's fighting the fire, trying to save lives, property, and, floor collapses. He didn't have to go in there. An officer doesn't have to intervene in a domestic dispute or whatever. But anyway, I always thought that if somebody died because of duty, that there was going to be some magical government entity, some specialized entity that would come in, provide immediate and significant support to the family, help the agency through this nightmare situation that probably they had never encountered before. But the bottom line is there's no such entity. Every agency is left on their own to figure it out and to get through. And there's state and federal benefits, monetary benefits for families of fallen heroes, but those benefits take a long time to come. Unfortunately, right now, the federal benefit is taking at least a year and a half to process and be paid. In some cases, well more than that. And a lot of that is because, there were over 1,300 COVID line of duty deaths in the United States. First responders who couldn't socially distance, they couldn't work from home, they were still out answering calls, responding to people who needed help. And unfortunately, many of them got COVID and many of those died. And so that has slowed down the federal benefits. Anyway, I thought there was this entity that did that. Learned the hard way after having multiple friends die in the line of duty that, there's no such thing. Every agency has to deal with it on their own. And then later, there was an incident where 2 officers were shot and killed, and one of them was married, had an infant daughter. And we found out about a year later that his wife was about to become homeless. And that just really incensed me. How is that possible? How do we as citizens allow that to happen? Where, this individual went out and routinely risked his life. He was actually serving a warrant. He was arresting somebody who was wanted on a warrant, when the shooting occurred. How does an individual go out and routinely risk their life, then ultimately give their life? And we not as society take better care of the family. And then us as police officers, how do we not take care of our own better than that? And so that's where the impetus came. That's where the idea came that we have to do something to take better care of our families. And so Congress that started conversations, I heard about an organization in St. Louis that provides a significant amount of monetary support. Got the idea of, well, let's start one of those in Louisville, and it just evolved to eventually what you now know as Supporting Heroes, where it wasn't just Louisville police, it's now police, fire, and EMS, all of Indiana, all of Kentucky. And then a few years ago, we added Missouri.
It's awesome.
That was a long answer to your question, but that's kind of the beginning history, how the idea came, and then what we were hoping to do.
I mean, honestly, until a representative from your organization actually came in and talked to one of the agencies that I've previously worked for, I kind of had the same thought that you had, which led you to start this organization. Was I just assumed there was some magical government entity as well that would come forth and take care of the families, and how could you just ignore them and let them starve, let bills, back up, lose houses. Until somebody from your organization actually came into that agency and actually spoke, I didn't know.
Yeah, we
Do you one
don't.
better? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, we don't do a good job of raising awareness, in making people aware of what the organization does, because the best time for us to tell who we are and what we're doing is when we're serving, when we're doing what we do. But it's also the worst time. If somebody has fallen in the line of duty and we come in and say, hey, look how we're helping, then that's not right. We can't do anything to take the focus away from the individual who has given his or her life. We can't take the focus away from the family or the agency or the community. We're there to serve, not to get. And so we don't do a lot of promotion, and we need to be better about that. So I appreciate this opportunity to tell the story.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. And I'll agree with you. We all see some of these videos online, YouTube or TikTok or whatever, and it's, Joe Schmo out there in the public. He's got his cell phone up and he's recording himself giving money to the homeless. It's like, well, why do you have to record yourself helping somebody? Just help them. Like, don't make a big deal about it. And that's exactly what you guys are doing. You guys are helping people, but you're doing it in the shadows. You're not making a big deal about it. You're not going around telling, and that's why I 100% support your organization. And I'll agree with Cody. I was in the same boat. Back in 2000, thought the same thing. I thought, if somebody dies in the line of duty, well, at least their family will be taken care of from state government or federal government or whatever, and it'll be instant. And I learned that the hard way on November 11th, 2012, when Mark Haudenschild died. And you were there that next morning.
I was there that night.
Yeah, it was quick. Like instantly it seemed. And then I had learned that you came all the way from Louisville, and I was like, "Holy cow. You got here quick." But, that was the time when, one, we all learned that no such entity exists other than what you guys are doing. You guys were helping, and we'll kind of get into what it is that you guys do. And we also learned just from that how much the community actually supported our department as well, because I think it was about a week of going through all the preparations and, the planning and everything. And community members, it seemed like every hour on the hour were coming in, they were dropping off food. Businesses were donating food and just wanting to show their support for the department.
There was a very strong community support or community response there, and all those things you mentioned, from food, et cetera. But I remember something very vividly, sitting in the room with the recliners. And, as police officers like to joke about firefighter recliners, but I was sitting in one of those recliners, and somebody knocked on the door, and one of you guys answered the door, and there was a woman, and she was probably homeless. And I think she had like $3, probably the only $3 she had to her name. But she wanted to give it to you guys to give to the family. And she had tears in her eyes. That made quite the impact, and it did to all everybody who was there, because that was $1 million to that woman. but she was moved by what happened and she wanted to do something.
Yeah, that community support, that's a good sign that you as a department and you as an individual are doing what you're supposed to be doing. When the community is supporting you, that's awesome. So with supporting heroes, so first you mentioned that the whole state of Indiana, whole state of Kentucky, and Missouri. Do you guys, I know Missouri was kind of within the last few years. Do you guys have intentions of trying to grow out further and help more?
Missouri, we had it about 7 years ago, I think. I don't remember the exact year. You know, we would entertain expansion. I don't think we would do a full state. I think we would, you know, maybe take a cluster of counties in a new state if there was interest in us coming there. You know, unfortunately, there's some politics involved in what we do. There's turf battles and egos, and so you know, we met a lot of resistance when we first started, and you know, there were organizations that, and I knew we'd have to prove ourselves. I mean, it's not like we just said, okay, we're going to start this organization, and people are going to give us money, and then they're going to let us in on their agency's darkest day, and you know, let us in to help and connect us to the family. So we knew that wouldn't be easy, but we didn't know it was going to be as hard as it was. We did try to expand to another state a few years ago, and had a lot of we had support from a few, but there were a couple of folks from state agencies that gave us a lot of grief about trying to come into that state and not giving them the opportunity to do it themselves. And it's like, well, you could have done this in your state before we did it in ours. And that was easily 15 years ago, and they still don't have any support organization in that entire state. So there are places we'd love to go. We'd love to serve. So if there's an area that people are interested that's more contiguous to where we currently serve, we'd be interested in exploring that possibility.
I know public safety has a lot of politics, and believe me, I have gone on tangents about it in the past, so I'll spare this episode from that. Are you seeing issues on a political side outside of the department? I'm talking like county, state, government. Are you seeing issues on that, or is it mainly a mixture or a little bit of less than that?
It's not government entities that I'm not sure. I guess I'm not 100% sure I understood the question, but it's not government entities that we have an issue with. It's like associations, public safety associations. I remember one in particular, a person said he was speaking badly about us. And this is years and years ago. We have a great relationship with that organization now. And he said, you know, Erica, first he spoke badly about us one day. The people told me about it. I came to speak in rebuttal the next day. And I'm a member of that organization. I said, when a leader of this organization gets up and speaks, you should expect that they're going to speak the truth. And that didn't happen yesterday. And I can tell you, you know, what was wrong. I can tell you, you know, my side, but you still won't know who to believe. And the people you should ask are the people we've served. And started naming people who from that organization who had died in the line of duty. And I said, you ask their families. What they say is what really matters. Anyway, for a variety of reasons, things happened over the next couple of years. Now we have a very great relationship with that organization. They support us financially. You know, and again, we understand that, especially law enforcement. You know, we don't trust anybody. You know, the old saying is, "In God we trust." Everybody else we check through NCIC, the National Crime Information Center. And so, and I get it. Also, we're saying again, when the agency has its darkest day, we want you to let us in. We want you to connect us to the family of your fallen brother or sister. And that does take trust. And so we knew it would take a while to earn that trust. And fortunately, you know, 20 and a half years later, we have very few problems in that area now.
Good.
I mean, I could totally understand. You know, we've talked before on this show about, you know, public safety as a family, and you know, everybody always sees fire and police officers kind of bicker back and forth at each other and making fun of each other, but you know, hurt one of those people that I'm bickering with and see what happens, because it's going to be a bigger problem. But at the end of the
Absolutely.
day, somebody within our own department, they die, their family is our family, and we want to protect them. And I can totally understand being a little cautious and maybe not necessarily wanting to let somebody else step in. I think that's when it turns into a situation where that department or that agency or that organization or whatever needs to understand at the end of the day, for the family, that's what ultimately matters. Like you said, talking to those family members that have gotten that help, that's who we're here to help. And it's tough in this field. Ego is a very big thing, and sometimes that's good and sometimes that's not so great.
Yeah, that lifts one piece off. I was going to say, and when that person responded to my rebuttal, he said, Eric, I don't have a problem with your organization. You just have to understand that our organization is X number of years old. And I said, I understand that. And a good leader would stand up here and say, we take care of our own and mean it. But a great leader would know that your organization is not a survivor support organization. You're not focused on dealing with line of duty death. You're dealing with other things, including lobbying and et cetera. A great leader would say, yes, we take care of our own. We do our absolute best. One of the things we do is we know we're not a survivor. We don't specialize in this. And so we partner with an organization that does. And they do now, but it took a while for people to accept that. And again, I'm not bad mouthing the organization. It just, we were new and, it took a while. And so going into a new state would, I think, potentially bring some of those challenges. And I think that was ego and turf when we tried to go into the other state that I mentioned. But we want to serve. So, absolutely, we would certainly entertain an invitation to expand if there was interest in us doing that. And I have some places where I'd like to go just because I like those states and, would like to spend more time there.
Let's kind of talk about what it is that Supporting Hero does. Obviously, we know that you support the families and that sort of thing, but kind of walk us through what that process looks like.
Well, when we get a notification of a line of duty death, our commitment is to respond as quickly as possible. And our response team is made up of an awful lot of volunteers, and so they're kind of spread out. And I think when you were mentioning Mark Hollandschild's death, what you might not have known is that one of our team members was actually on the scene very early after it happened. And I think you might know now that you probably know the team member I'm talking about. And so even though I came from Kentucky, there were two team members already there when I arrived. And they were doing things, they were gathering information and talking to people. So, we have a lot of folks who help in our outreach. But anyway, we respond as quickly as possible. We meet with the head of the affected agency or the person, it could be the chief's tied up, at a hospital or at the scene or, already with the family, but we follow the guidance of the leadership of the agency for the appropriate time to meet with the family. When we hear of a line of duty death, we all know there's going to be grief, shock, in the case of a felonious death, anger. But the thing that we don't recognize, that we don't think about often, is that in many cases, in fact, in most cases, that surviving spouse or partner is thinking, how am I going to feed the kids? How am I going to keep our home? The main breadwinner or the only breadwinner fell. And now, I'm thinking of a particular case where this public safety officer had, first responder he and his wife had just purchased a house. And about a month later, he's killed in the line of duty. And they had a young child. And so now how am I going to feed our son? How am I going to afford our home, our dream home, the home that we had, I think they had it built, and, this home that we had dreamed of living in, how am I going to afford to keep it? And then they also, you typically start beating themselves up. What's the matter with me? He just died and I'm already thinking about money. There must be something wrong with me. I must be a rotten, evil person. And so the first thing we do is we give that person a check for $5,000. We call that a down payment on a promise. First off, $5,000, that money's not going to change what happened. It's not going to bring somebody back. It's not going to solve all their financial concerns, but it's a down payment on a promise. And our goal, our mission is to come back after the funeral to determine what they need on a monthly basis to help them meet their bills. as they're awaiting state and federal benefits or insurance or whatever it is, because we want to take the financial burden away to free them to grieve, to free them to help their children grieve and to work through that aspect of it. And so that's the first big piece is the financial support.
I mean, that's huge. Like you said, that a lot of times that's the last thing on anybody's mind is the financial side. Um, even in a department or anything, nobody's necessarily thinking about that. They're thinking about the obvious, like, man, our brother or sister is gone now. Like, now what do we do from an emotional standpoint?
You know, and I didn't mention this, but we try. We're not always successful in if we have, let's say it's a young widow. We try to have another widow come right away within a few hours, if appropriate and accepted by that survivor, to talk to her about the things that she's feeling. You know, again, she could be beating herself up because I'm thinking about money, and having somebody else that is walking in the same shoes that you're just starting to walk in to say, hey, you know, it's okay to worry about your survival and the survival of your family is natural and it's appropriate. So don't beat yourself up. What you're feeling is normal for an abnormal situation. And so, you know, if we don't do that, if we're not able to do that right away, we'll do that in the days or weeks ahead, where we connect the new survivors, the spouse, parents, et cetera, to other survivors that understand what they're going through better than we can if we've not experienced it.
Jody, you got anything?
Nothing. But if we could take a break, I need to use the
Yeah.
restroom facilities.
Oh, I didn't know that was an option that we could take a break. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We'll take a short break here and we'll be right back. All right. Cody got his potty break in, so I think we're good.
Feel much.
Much gooder. Yeah. So you mentioned the financial, and we were kind of talking about this offline a little bit, but I just want to also kind of bring this to fruition as well. Obviously, we've kind of talked about back and forth about arrangements and stuff, but if you want to kind of take it from there and what else you guys do to help.
Well, we first responded. Our first objective is to help with the emotional needs of the immediate survivor, be it a spouse, partner, the closest survivor. Usually, it's a financially dependent survivor, and if it is a financially dependent survivor, then we do give the $5,000 check. If not, then we assess the need or assess the situation. Maybe not give it immediately, but determine who to give it to. Uh, We also offer to assist with the funeral, and we have a team that's made up of volunteers, volunteer police, fire, and EMS personnel from across Indiana and Kentucky. And they train together as one team and can respond to a police line of duty death or fire or EMS. And, we have, again, people spread out across the two states. So where the death occurs and who's available, we might have a mixture of, typically we have fire respond to fire and police respond to police, but there's also a lot of crossover. We had an incident in Kentucky almost 3 years ago that there were 7 shot, 6 officers and a firefighter, and 3 of the officers died, and as well as a canine. And it was an all hands on deck. We were going to be, it was all turned over to us, and we were going to be planning 3 funerals in short order. And so we had firefighters from up in your area, Fort Wayne area. We had fire and EMS personnel come down from there, and people from all over Kentucky came together to do what needed to be done to support those 3 families, to honor those fallen heroes, and help the agencies, et cetera. So that's a big part of what we do as well. We train, we try to develop the best procedures to have the highest honors, to have it done smoothly, as close to perfection as we possibly can. We call it ultimate honor for ultimate sacrifice.
I can't imagine as granted, I was never a fire chief, but I couldn't imagine. You think about all the things that a fire chief has to deal with when a line of duty death occurs. I mean, you've got OSHA, you've got you know you got to pull up like training records, you got to pull up all the stuff you're trying to help take care of your team and try to help them with what they need. You're trying to help the family. I can't imagine, and that's just day one. Like now you've got all these other things too that you've got to plan for and prepare for. And I think again, I know I've said this quite a bit, but I think it's awesome that there are organizations out there, yours included, that are able to help with a lot of that stuff. Obviously help with the family, but also help the department kind of with the planning and just going through that whole process of the funeral and everything.
In our goal, we don't want to come in and take over. It's not about us. It's not about how we want to do things. We make recommendations, but most importantly, we want to take the burden off of the agency. The agency personnel of the agency should still be the ones in the key position of honors, but they shouldn't be directing people where to park at the church or at the cemetery. They shouldn't be planning the traffic route. I went to a state trooper's funeral in another state years ago, along with some Kentucky troopers. And as we got off the interstate, we noticed there were troopers manning traffic control points at every intersection until we got to the high school where the funeral was held. Those troopers, in our mindset, those troopers were part of a grieving family. You have the legal biological family, and then you have the public safety family. And all of those folks in the public safety family should have been free to be part of the funeral, to grieve, not to be directing traffic and anything of that nature. I mean, obviously, some people, that's what they need to help them grieve. But I guarantee you, all those troopers at all those intersections were not there because that's where they wanted to be. There should have been arrangements made with law enforcement personnel from around the region to cover that and handle that for them, to free them all up to attend the service and to be fully engaged in the service. And that's what we try to do. We try to free the agency from those types of responsibilities. And again, what we do to help the agency is up to them. We'll help to whatever degree they desire.
Yeah, I think one of the things that a lot of people forget about is when there is a line of duty death, a lot of departments are still, depending on the size of the department, but a lot of departments are still responding to the calls within their area because at the end of the day, it's what we signed up to do, right? But there are times where, like, we were fortunate enough in 2012 that we had several county departments and even the city was willing to step up and cover our area for us while we were, because we were also, not only did we have all of that, but we were also transporting Mark from the forensic center to the funeral home and then obviously the funeral, and we were doing the guard duty and all that kind of stuff too. So it was very, just another thing about the community, even the public safety community coming together to help those departments is phenomenal.
Agreed.
So we touched on the funeral, we touched on assisting with the funeral or offering advice on that. We touched on financial and helping the family, the immediate family with any support that they may need. What else am I missing, Eric? What else does supporting heroes do?
Two big things that come to mind: the National Memorial Services. There's a National Fallen Firefighter Memorial Weekend that now is the first weekend in May. Although here in Kentucky, we have another big event that weekend that kind of contradicts a little bit, the Kentucky Derby. They moved it to the first weekend in May. It used to be in October. And that's where the families of the firefighters who fell in the line of duty the previous year will all go to Emmitsburg, Maryland, to the U.S. Fire Administration Academy. It's a beautiful campus with a powerful memorial, and they'll see their loved one's name on the memorial. There's a candlelight vigil Saturday night, a memorial service on Sunday, and they get to participate in those and be present when the nation honors their hero. And so we don't want people to miss because they can't afford to go. So we pay for the immediate survivors to travel there, pay for their airfare, or if they don't want to fly, we've had people go by train or drive, and we'll reimburse their fuel for driving, or we'll pay for the train ticket, or whatever it takes, so that they don't miss it. And we're also there to support them. We're there, and we have vans ready to take them. If they want to go to get food or they want to go to the store, and it's near Gettysburg. So if they have some downtime and want to go to the historical sites, the battlefields, we'll pick them up and take them wherever it is they need to go, whenever they want to go. And then National Police Week in Washington, D.C. It's the week that includes May 15th. Uh, it's a very expensive trip. It's 6 nights, and we pay for the families to go, and we are there with them. Again, we have vans as shuttles 24 hours a day. If they call and want to go somewhere, and what happens sometimes, you'll have a survivor who they can't sleep and they just want to go to the memorial. 3 o'clock in the morning. It's quiet, it's peaceful, and we send a van, pick them up, take them there. We stay there with them. We don't stay in their space. We step back, give them space to be alone, be with their loved one's name, but also to watch over them and make sure they're safe. Or if they have downtime, want to go to Arlington National Cemetery, whatever it is, we're there for them. I mean, the same with the National EMS Memorial Service, which is in Arlington, Virginia. And before supporting heroes, honestly, a lot of families missed the National Memorial Service because they couldn't afford to go. A lot of the families haven't been out of their community or out of their state. Maybe they've never flown. And so it's a very intimidating trip to do that, especially go to Washington, D.C., the nation's capital. It's very busy. And we try to help them be comfortable with that trip. And again, we fund it, which is a huge, huge expense.
That's great that you guys do that, though. I'm sure it means a lot to the families involved.
It does. And, for us, it's another way, we do it in honor of the person they lost. Our mission statement says our mission is to honor the service and sacrifice of public safety heroes who give their lives in the line of duty by caring for the loved ones they leave behind and taking them there. So ensuring that they can see when their hero is honored in as comfortable of a setting as possible is powerful. I mean, all three of those services are very powerful, and they'll hold on to those memories for the rest of their lives, seeing their loved one honored in that manner.
How does supporting heroes get their support?
Well, our primary source of funding is we contact municipalities, government entities, cities, counties, and we ask to set up payroll deduction. And then of course, usually it starts with a fire chief, police chief, et cetera, to get their blessing. Yeah, they want to support us. Then they connect us to the right person with the municipality. We set up payroll deduction, and then we do presentations to their personnel. In fact, just the last few days, that's what I've been doing in multiple cities. We visited firehouses and training centers and police roll calls for two reasons. One is we want them to know who we are and what we do. So if that dark day ever does come, that they know what we're going to bring, that they know we're legitimate, that we're going to be there to help and kind of understand how we will do things. And then ask them to support it, not because of what it might do for their family or their agency, but what they know that it will do for their public safety family. Because I was talking to some police officers last night. One of the officers in the roll call, her father had been killed in the line of duty when she was 4 or 5 years old. She's a fairly new officer, and she had been involved in a deadly force encounter. It really hit home talking to that group. But again, hopefully it never happens here again, but it's going to happen somewhere in your state, that there's going to be an officer or a firefighter or an EMS worker who's going to die in the line of duty. And by supporting us, that when you hear of a first responder falling, that you're part of helping to take care of the family. So anyway, that's our principal funding, is through payroll deduction from first responders. But we also have corporate sponsorships, and we need those badly. I don't know if you know this. Again, we cover Indiana, Kentucky, and Missouri prior to the pandemic. So the 10-year period ending in 2019, we averaged 17 deaths a year. During the pandemic, we averaged 54 deaths a year. But it was horrific for us. We did the best we could. There were times, you couldn't have funerals, and our families chose to delay and have memorial services. But we tried to respond to everyone, give the 5,000, do what we could to help. Of course, some of them we didn't find out about until later. But it was just a really tough period. But you would have thought that in 2023, after the pandemic was over, and we haven't had any any COVID line of duty deaths since 2022. In 2023, you would think we'd go back to 17. We had 28 deaths in 2023. We had 34 deaths in 2024. And as of today in 2025, we've already had 18 deaths. I have no idea what 2025 is going to turn out to be, but it's already horrible. If you go by averages, we should only have, about 5 deaths now, and we're already at 18. So we definitely need the support more than we ever have. We do have a company that has an annual golf outing that raises a lot of money. We get support from, even sometimes totally unexpected sources. We'll take it from, anybody wants to support us. We're happy to take their support.
What is the best way for somebody to support you? How can they go about supporting the organization?
Well, as you know, we have memberships, and that's when we go to the public safety agencies and set up payroll deduction. We ask for $120 a year to be a member. It's usually $5 per paycheck if they're paid biweekly. And we tell them, you get a card, you get a sticker, you get a pin, but the real value of membership is intrinsic. It's in here. If you hear of a first responder falling, it's your part of caring for that family. So again, that's what we ask for. Even citizens, a lot of them go online on our website, supportingheroes.org, and they'll sign up, maybe donate $10 a month through a credit card or bank draft, and we'll make them a member. We'll send them the card, the sticker, and the pin. Some people give more and some people give less. That's what it takes to be considered a member, to get those things. And we have family membership. It's $835 a paycheck for those paid biweekly. It's $200 a year. And then we send the membership cards and stickers to adults and all children in a household. Kids like our cards and stickers. We it's just a higher level of support. We appreciate it.
Nice. I think that brings us up to speed. Is there anything, Cody, do you have any questions that you want to ask before we wrap things up?
No, I'm good.
Awesome. Eric, any last remarks that you'd like to leave for anybody?
If there's a first responder out there that's listening, who really has a passion for this cause, wanting to help care for families of fellow first responders who fall in the line of duty, we would love to have them to join our memorial team. A lot of agencies, people are actively serving. A lot of times their leadership will allow them to be relieved from duty to respond, to deploy to a line of duty death. And so they still get paid. They get to take an agency vehicle in most cases, but they're released to respond and work with us and do what needs to be done. And then after the funeral, they go back to work. And so we'd love to talk to anybody who's interested in doing that. And of course, if somebody's listening and we don't have support from your agency, we'd love to talk to you about that too, about setting up payroll deduction and coming in and talking to your personnel. When we do that, we answer a lot of questions about line of duty death, about benefits, state, federal benefits, some of the rules that are associated with that. A lot of scenarios, if this happens to a first responder, does that constitute line of duty death? We get a lot of those questions. We'd love to talk to anybody who wants to listen, who's interested in learning more about those things.
Awesome. Very, very amazing organization, Eric, and definitely a great conversation with you. I greatly appreciate you joining us today and just kind of sharing a little bit about your story and sharing the story of supporting heroes. And hopefully we can stir up some more support for you guys and continue your mission.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate being here on this with you as your guest. Thank you.
Awesome.
Eric, you're doing good work. Your organization's doing good work. I couldn't even tell you how long I've been a member of Supporting Heroes. It was back when, like I said, somebody from your agency actually came in and spoke to my place of employment at the time. But even after that, you still have my membership and you still have my yearly membership dues. But
thank you. Thank
good
you very much.
organization. You're doing great work. Keep it up.
Thank you. I will. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric.
Take care.